For a protein alternative advocate, I think my opinion is probably a
Right.
little bit unpopular, but I don't actually think I don't think anything is going to be the standout product or technology. I think it's going to be a hybrid. The downfall, and you mentioned it earlier with the plant-based alternatives, is they are overly processed and they're not healthier for you. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to move away from meat and then be in a worse position. I think that's sort of the problem at the moment, and everyone's really focused on the eating experience and sort of the sensory characteristics of it, but the nutrition is very important, and that's where animal agriculture became
Right.
so big. Is just the nutritional components of meat and dairy, and that's really what we at DeNovo Dairy are focusing on bringing to the plant-based space, but just to nutrition in general. It's just that animal component that you just can't get from plants, and it's really important to not overlook it, because otherwise we're going to run into other issues further down the line, for example. And I don't think we have to look at it as one or the other. I think that's the problem with us as humans, is we really like looking at it in extremes, and that's why we're in this position. Like, that's how we landed up here. It's just we went all this way, now we want to go all this
Sure.
way. So it's a protein that typically comes from breast milk, and currently we get it from
Right.
bovine milk, because we can't exactly harvest anything from humans. But it still comes in very small concentrations in milk, so it's very scarce and it's very expensive. But it's imperative for infants, from a developmental point of view. But the problem is that you don't actually find it in a lot of infant formulas because it's so expensive. So you don't even find it in current infant formulas. So, I mean, our approach is to sort of supplement even the dairy-based infant formulas with this protein, because it's so important. So that's very powerful, because now we can start creating human proteins specifically designed for humans. So we're looking to be in the market
Great.
early 2024. And we're working with a US-based partner as well. So the US is definitely one of our first go-to
Cool.
markets as well.
First of all, huge congratulations to anyone who bought some Cold Food Science stock within the past few weeks. You'll be sitting at a very nice return. We still have a long way to go. I'm excited about today's video for a couple of reasons. First, this is another look at a Cold Food Science portfolio company, DeNovo Foods. I'm just wanting to post as many of these interviews as I can find, because long form interviews are just a great way of learning about how people think about their own companies, and we just get a lot of great information about these companies as well. I'm dying to learn more about all of these portfolio companies, and it's really hard to find this information. So whenever I can find a great interview on one of the portfolio companies, I'm going to post it here. So this one is DeNovo Foods, and as we can see, they're making a protein, Lactoferrin, and this protein is found in breast milk. You can get it either from humans or for cows. They're working on both. Really important for tons of uses, but particularly for the infant formulas that you can find. And a lot of them don't even today have this protein. This is an expensive protein, so great business there. And it sounds like they're going to be launching in South Africa and the United States as soon as next year, so in a few months. Another reason I really like this interview is that both the interviewer and the co-founder at DeNovo Labs have a very similar outlook to me and very similar thinking to where we're going with the plant-based food and just food tech in general. They both agree that a lot of the plant-based products currently on the market are overprocessed, which is a big problem. We've been looking at precision fermentation, we've been looking at cellular agriculture, and yes, I think eventually we will one day get to a point where we will have full cuts of meat grown by cells, but that's going to take quite a long time still. And so in the meantime, where is the industry actually going? That's really going to revolve a lot around combining all of these technologies, so the plant-based, the precision fermentation, and the cellular agriculture. The next number of videos that I do are really going to be drilling into what this new wave of plant-based food combines with these new technologies is going to look like. And so this video is really a first look. I encourage you to watch the whole thing. Again, links in the description for the entire interview. Let's get into the video.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear about how you got into the alternative protein space. I know a lot of people, academics, even finance, are moving more towards climate change innovation, animal agriculture innovation, and of course alternative proteins to help us move off of animal products. I did see in your bio that you started with insects. I've never really gone into that palette category yet, but I'd love to hear how you arrived there.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I studied food science and I specialized in alternative proteins. So I looked a lot at insects as an alternative to meat.
Okay.
I think one of the reasons behind it was really just coming from the South African context, there is insects that are consumed, and one of the big downfalls is that it's not very westernized. And so
Hmm.
I just really wanted to try and understand, like, was there a way to, like, reframe insects and put them in a more modern setting whilst trying to find a sustainable solution to things like livestock farming. So
Hmm.
um, looking sort of as insects as a meat alternative because it has the nutritional component and the sustainability component. Um, so did a lot of research on that, and then went into starting a company with Jean, the CEO of DeNovo Dairy before DeNovo Dairy, and we looked at insects as a dairy alternative,
Okay.
which was quite an ambitious start to entrepreneurship, I think.
Sure.
um, yeah, so that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We learned a lot, and I think on the innovation side, there was a lot that we did that was really awesome.
Okay.
Um, but I guess to your point, the palatability, or at least the preconception about it is there's challenges. So, why we moved into precision fermentation was really looking for technologies that could have impact, because you need to have a wide scale adoption to have impact, and
Right.
sort of what technologies could have that wide adoption from a consumer point of view and from a technology point of view. And sort of precision fermentation has that potential. So that's when we co-founded DeNovo Dairy with two other people. We started with quite a strong co-founding
Hmm.
team with a diverse set of skills. With I guess with the ambition still being the same, just the technology is I'd say better.
Right. That's great. Yeah. Take a step back for a second. I'd love to talk about just the concept of how you and John, you said is his name, right? How you and John
Yes, yeah.
thought about replacing dairy with insect. Because so there's a really famous advertising marketing book from like my 30s or 40s, I think, called Breakthrough Advertising. And the whole thing is about the life cycle of the market and understanding where the market understands your product when you're entering that category. So it seems like most meat analogs people understand now are burgers, and we're starting to have more, alt dairy milks obviously are a huge portion of the market right now, and there are some sausages coming on board, and like there's a little bit of, I have like the Vuna plant-based tuna in my fridge right now, which is pretty good for plant-based tuna, but insects is really tough. I remember a friend gifted me some like bolognese sauce cricket protein, and I couldn't even bring myself to try it, and I wanted to. I wanted to give it a shot, and I couldn't do it. So I was wondering, how did you just decide finally to pivot to DeNovo now, and like what did you find when you were taking the path of the insect dairy route?
Yeah, I think your experience
Okay.
is very common, and I think that was one of the biggest, one of the biggest things for us. So we started a restaurant in Cape Town because I think one of the biggest things is exposure, sort of like having the place to come and try it and taste it, and sort of accessibility. Otherwise, it just stays this
Right.
foreign concept, and sort of having someone serve it to you in a very palatable way does sort of start changing your concept, your preconceived ideas
Hmm.
about eating something. But what we found is that even though people were it was very popular. People came and they tried it, and it became quite a big talking point. But I think it really just stayed a novelty. It was really more of like, I want to go try this because I've never tried it before. And I mean, we had the insects we made it into an ingredient and then used it in a product. So it wasn't like a whole insect or anything. It was really
Okay.
to try and normalize it. And even, yeah, and then we did a huge consumer study with it, and we still found that people, even if they enjoyed the product, wouldn't be repeat customers because like they just couldn't
The
quite
insect
get
vibe.
over that.
Yeah. Well, and even in
It's
the,
a
in the vegan
yes,
community, even though
yes.
it is much more sustainable, some still think about harming animals or insects the same as they would be, like full livestock, for example. I don't know how I feel about that, but there is some, like, I'm not scared of like killing a cockroach or a spider, and like none of that bothers me. But if I'm doing like, have you ever done an escape room? For example, okay, so I'm a
No, no.
fanatic about them, but anytime I'm in these things and there's some, even if there's fake bugs that I have to put my hand into them, like I know they're fake, I can see that they're rubber, and I can't make myself do it. like I'm completely averse to it. So I really wonder if there's something just like this, another tangent, but like something genetically that we're like, this is bad for me. I don't I For
Like
sure, for
survival
sure.
instinct
I
type
wonder, but
thing.
it's great that you guys opened that restaurant and had people coming to try it. Like, hats out to South Africans. Like, I'm from Canada, and I don't know if Canadians would embrace an insect protein restaurant like that. So that's cool that you guys tried it. What do you think you learned from that entire experience that brought you to DeNovo?
Yeah, so I think the consumer element was huge. Honestly, I don't think the plant-based
Mm,
movement's too different. I think because we also did quite a lot
right,
of work on plant-based milks, myself and Jean. And I guess to get that huge mass consumption, people are so used to something that they love, and dairy and meat is so, I don't know, it's like this prehistoric thing in our brain,
right,
and it's really difficult to combat. No matter how close a plant-based alternative is, as soon as someone knows it's plant-based, they're like, oh,
sure,
it's just not as good. It's this thing. So, and that's really why we looked at precision fermentation as a technology, because you can create animal proteins like identical to what you would find in an animal, whether it's dairy or whether it's in
right,
meat, and it's 100% the same. It's just not from an animal anymore. So you really have that power to create sustainable proteins, which are usually typically what are
right.
functional, what is functional in foods, and that's really what we found very exciting. And so
Yeah,
the potential there is huge, and that's I think how you're going to convert all the meat eaters and all the dairy consumers is really by giving them what they want, just from a
yeah, right.
better
Yeah,
source.
it's really interesting that the entire market in general, it's moving so quickly with how much investment is going into it, and like even this summer, like half of all of Europe is on fire right now. Like we're really starting to see the consequences of the life we've decided to create for the last 100, 200 years. And but I really wonder like how fast this plant based is going to switch to like cultured meats or precision fermentation, because like even I've looked at a few plant based companies to invest in. There's one in Spain called Huda or Euda. So and I love these guys. I eat their chicken chunks all the time. The products themselves are much less processed than traditional vegan products were, which has got me to shift in that direction because I really don't like processed food at all. But the Euda products have like maybe 3 or 4 ingredients, and they're mostly all natural as far as I know. But I wonder like how quickly it's going to change from all these alt dairy milks that we have to all of a sudden we're looking at de novo sort of products where it's nutritional, like real milk, just not from cows, and also like the alternative meats, like these are going to be burgers and steaks and chicken that perhaps will just come from cells, and then I wonder if it will displace that plant-based market altogether. Do you have any feedback on that?
Yeah, I'd say for a protein alternative advocate, I think my opinion is probably a
Right.
little bit unpopular, but I don't actually think I don't think anything is gonna be the standout product or technology. I think it's going to be a hybrid, and I think that's the only way that we're going to really solve anything, because there are places where plants or crops thrive, and that sort of environment is perfect for it. And then there's areas where you don't have a lot of arable land, where technologies where you can farm in a closed environment is better. And even I think there's a place for livestock. To be honest, it's really going to have to be a blend of things. And I think why we're looking at it from an ingredient point of view is that we can facilitate a lot of that, instead of designing an end product and saying this is going to be the standard product, the
Right.
silver
Me neither.
bullet, which I personally don't believe exists. We can use this protein to sort of improve the nutritional attributes of plant-based milk and bring it closer to what we're used to. And I think plant-based milks can get there. And I think it just needs like these certain elements that, nutritionally you just can't get from plants. And I think you can start creating this hybrid product. It doesn't have to be milk. It doesn't have to be plant-based milk. It could just be this perfect hybrid where we can, we're in a position now with the technology where we can create something that's perfectly designed for humans because we have these really novel technologies and we have plants to sort of, create this perfect harmony. I don't think we have to look at it as one or the other. I think that's the problem with us as humans is we really like looking at it in extremes, and that's why we're in this position. Like that's how we landed up here. It's just we went all this way, now we want to go all this way.
I've spoken, exchanged some emails with the EUDA founders when they were doing their last raise. And what I find really fascinating is their plan to launch like another 10 products. And I think what we had in traditional animal agriculture, you had like these livestock farms or there's only one thing they could do. They could raise cows or pigs or chickens or whatever, and then that's it. Whereas these new plant-based gigantic companies, they'll be able to offer chicken and fish and dairy, and as that consolidation starts to happen, then they can put all of the the resources they have coming in from their current products into an array of R&D for things like precision fermentation. Are you guys having those conversations about the market as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. It's sort of quite exciting because you can create a lot more. I think the downfall, and you mentioned it earlier with the plant-based alternatives, is they are overly processed and they're not healthier for you. In fact, you don't want to move away from meat and then be in a worse position. I think that's sort of the problem at the moment, and everyone's really focused on the eating experience and sort of the sensory characteristics of it, but the nutrition is very important, and that's where animal agriculture became so big. It's just the nutritional components of meat and dairy, and that's really what we at DeNovo Dairy are focusing on, bringing to the plant-based space, but just to nutrition in general. It's just that animal component that you just can't get from plants, and it's really important to not overlook it, because otherwise we're going to run into other issues further down the line, for example. And
further into what DeNovo is doing now, I'd love to hear about like how you guys are planning to help create. Would you call it vegan infant formula, or how would you refer to it?
Yeah, so I guess it's once again it's going to be one of those hybrid approaches. I think so. Maybe just a bit more context on the protein we're working on. It's a protein that typically comes from breast milk, and currently we get it from bovine milk because we can't exactly harvest anything from humans. But it still comes in very small concentrations in milk, so it's very scarce and it's very expensive. But it's imperative for infants from a developmental point of view. But the problem is that you don't actually find it in a lot of infant formulas because it's so expensive. So you don't even find it in current infant formulas. So, I mean, our approach is to sort of supplement even the dairy-based infant formulas with this protein because it's so important. But what it does allow is sort of the evolution of infant formulas into more vegan products as well, like sort of that bringing it closer and closer to what you would get from your mother, but you don't actually need to get it from animals anymore. So I think it sort of has both elements, which is quite exciting. And I think the first evolution is naturally just to sort of solve the big problem at the moment, which is the current infant formulas just don't have it, except for the very, very premium ones. But that's not fair.
We can't harvest this thing from humans, but it's not possible to take human breast milk and isolate that. And if you can walk me through that, because I really don't understand any of this.
No worries. So I mean, you can isolate it from human breast milk, but I guess it's unethical because you can't just farm humans. So typically we get it from bovines. But what we're doing, we're using yeast, which is a very simple organism, but it's very, very efficient. Its metabolism is very efficient. And we program the genetics, which is identical to what you would find in either human breast milk or in bovine milk. So we're working on both, just for clarification. And then we insert that code into the yeast. So we don't even have to look at a cow or a person to do it. There's no actual genetic material coming from a live source. It's all programmed on a computer. And then we insert that into the yeast, and then we grow the yeast, and then that yeast produces those proteins. So that protein is identical to what you would find either in human breast milk or in bovine milk. So that way we can create an absolute nature identical replicate protein without ever having to get it from a cow or a human. So that's very powerful, because now we can start creating human proteins specifically designed for humans.
If you can take, because I know sometimes people will use bovine serum to create this cultured meat, and so I thought maybe if you had like breast milk, you could isolate the molecule and take that, and you wouldn't need that much to start to replicate. So it sounds like you're going to be able to make infant formula just generally across the board much more nutritious for infants. And is this going to be, I guess, at scale? Is it going to be commercially, I guess, viable for even like the poorer parts of the population as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So to jump onto your previous point, you can grow from cells. That would be more on the cell culture side. That we're not doing cell culture. Cell culture does allow for producing a couple of other elements as well, but the technology is a little bit more complicated. I'd say it's a little bit behind precision fermentation in terms of scale. So, to date, in terms of cell culture, I think there's one or two companies that are entering the scaling process. With precision fermentation, it's quite new in the food space, but with pharmaceuticals, they've been producing bioidentical molecules like insulin, for example, for over 30 years. So there are companies out there that are fermenting other proteins at scale. So I guess the only caveat is now, coming in it from a food perspective, we can drive the costs down because we don't have all the pharmaceutical challenges and grades and specifications and all that sort of stuff. So, the technology is scalable. It has been scaled. And from a food perspective, we can drive that cost down quite a lot, making this protein, which is currently incredibly expensive and scarce, more available and cheaper.
People, a certain spectrum of the political conversation that are saying like everyone in the Western world essentially starts out the same, and you can be whatever you want, and all of these things that I think are a little bit fantastical. Like they're not real, because even to your basic level for what we're talking about, like the best protein to feed your child, which is the building block for their brains, their body, how everything functions, is too expensive for a lot of the population to even be able to afford. So I didn't even know that. So that's really amazing that you'll be able to, I hate the word, but like democratize this animal protein for infant formula. And I guess a tag on to that is, are you also creating with precision fermentation non-whey protein?
We've developed it. We're not going to market with it. There's a couple of reasons for it. I think we really think that this protein that we're working on has a lot more potential, or a lot more impact from a nutritional point of view. Infant formula is definitely, I'd say, the biggest impact from a nutritional point of view, but it ranges throughout adulthood and into the elderly as well. It's really important in sports nutrition for recovery and performance. And from a nutraceutical perspective, sort of just as a good for you product, it's really, really important for balancing your immunity. And I think, in this day and age where we have such a, just a lot going on in life and we don't eat the right things, like these are the sorts of proteins that really, instead of, it's the whole food for medicine approach where if you just look after your body and you eat the right things, like you don't need to be taking things like antibiotics and stuff, or whatever, all these supplements, because this protein really allows your immunity to regulate itself. So it's a very, very cool protein. The infant formula, I think, is, the flagship, like really impactful market. But I think, even from an adult perspective, it also has a lot of value and importance there as well. So we sort of put the whey protein on the back burner, just because we feel it's not it's not as exciting from a nutritional point of view.
Because you have people that will buy whey protein for years and years and years, whereas infant formula is, you buy it for 12 months or whatever, and then it's and then it's gone. So that's really interesting. And how does the regulatory framework work to commercially launch a protein like that to act as a supplier to different alt protein manufacturers, or like someone like Nestle that I'm sure makes a ton of infant formula and all of these things? Like the EU, I would assume, is the most restrictive. And then you have a little bit more progressive policies around regulation, or loose policies, however you like to look at it, in places like
Sure.
Singapore or the US. Is there a reason why you decided to launch in South Africa? Like, aside from living there, is it just easier?
Yeah, so in South Africa, our regulations are a bit weird in that sort of, if it's not in the regulations, it's very difficult to change. But it does allow for certain things. So, for example, because we're creating a protein that already exists and it's nature identical, we can go to market. It doesn't necessarily stipulate where it has to come from, if that makes sense. So,
wow, that's a huge difference in time to market.
Yeah, so we can pretty much go to market when we're done with the upscaling, which is going to be early next year or mid next year. So our regulations are a little bit interesting, but the downside is if you are working with something like when we were working with insects, for example, and it's not in the regulations, we couldn't go to market, and to change that takes I don't even know what, a miracle, I think.
Right.
So. And then when you look at the US, for example, because we're working, so it depends on the protein. The human version is going to take a little bit longer because it's not currently regulated. The bovine version, which is also why we're working on it, is already regulated. So we just have to regulate the process of making it, or sort of the approval process, which is quite simple because our host already has GRAS status and stuff like that. So that's not actually going to be too tricky, but we still have to go through the whole GRAS FDA story.
Right.
Which is a lot shorter than the EU, which once again, the bovine will be easier than the human once again, just because although everyone has human lactoferrin from a young age if they breastfeed,
right,
it's technically not an ingredient that exists on the market. So
right, well, because that was my question. Even with a bovine protein or a human, I was wondering if you're going to have to do any clinical trials to see how this product that you're creating from precision fermentation, if there's going to be any undue side effect from human consumption.
Yeah, so likely there will have to be some sort of toxicology study.
Right.
It's not, I don't think it's going to be a full clinical study because there's a lot of clinical studies on human lactoferrin, for example, being conducted. So if you can prove that it's nature identical, you just do a toxicology study, and then which does take time, which is why it'll take a bit longer. Whereas the bovine version is already regulated for use.
And are you seeing any objections from the dairy industry yet? I know they've already started their fight against the alt milk products, that you can't call this milk, like that'll make much of a difference. But no conversation with the dairy industry yet?
We're actually speaking a lot to different dairy companies. So as I mentioned, we're sort of taking a hybrid approach because the dairy industry is actually an industry that is likely going to be using this protein a lot as well. They actually are looking for people like us, sort of synthetic biology companies, to sort of bring it to market because for them it's a benefit. It brings the cost down, makes it more, it makes it safer than what you would get from bovines and stuff like that. So they're actually quite excited about it. I think the benefit is that we're not going B2C, so we're not trying to overshadow anyone. We're really just trying to work with established companies and sort of changing it from the inside. I guess if you can just start bringing more and more sustainable options to the dairy space, even like you can make a lot of impact there as well. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Well, that's great.
So I guess it depends. That's the approach we're taking. Everyone's got different approaches, but we really want to. We really want to rather be friends than enemies.
Right. I guess, to what you were saying, I guess a lot of these dairy industries that eventually are going to have to adapt or die, because it's really clear that the market is going towards alternative dairy. And so they're either going to have to buy up producers like you, or they're not going to have the ingredients available, and then their sales are going to crater. So the one, I don't know if you would be able to answer this, but nutritionally or just biologically, it seems a lot of people in general are having a harder and harder time digesting dairy. Like every day I hear another person that's like, yeah, I'm off dairy because I realized it was affecting me negatively, for all sorts of reasons. So this molecule that you're going to be adding to infant formula, is it only the lactose? As long as there's no lactose, it's fine. So this product will be completely digestible by humans.
Yeah. So I guess there's different components to dairy that upset people. I think the lactose is the big one, and that's sort of the sugar component. So we're not going to have any of that. There are some proteins. Casein and whey does have. There are people that are highly allergic to it. So that is an issue for some people. And that sort of ranges, I think, in terms of the severity of it. The protein that we're working on is hypoallergenic, so there's no allergenic response. And I think, and especially on the human version of it, it comes from the human body, so there are no negative responses to it. So I think that's also what's quite exciting, is that it sort of has quite a big impact for everyone. And then you don't run into these challenges with, whatever the case is. But yeah, I think the dairy thing is becoming more and more of a thing, but I think everyone has different issues. So it's very difficult to pinpoint what it is. Like, it's either the sugars, or it's this protein, or it's that protein, or, it could even be the hormones in there. You just never know.
But that's the point that I think a lot of people dismiss for animal agriculture, and it's one of the reasons why I really am starting to eat as little as possible meat wise, because like there's just so many hormones and antibiotics pumped into these animals. And even if in the animal agriculture industry, the dairy industry will fool us and say, oh no, my farm is free range, you just cannot deal with animal agriculture at scale without these crutches that they're using as far as antibiotics, because the animals are getting so sick that are creating viruses that we're seeing all over the world now. And so it's like, how fast can you get us this protein, Leah? How long until we can see it in the US or Europe? And I don't have to depend on almonds and oat milk. What?
Yeah. We're pushing very hard. We're busy scaling up at the moment. So we're looking to be in the market early 2024. And we're working with a US-based partner as well. So the US is definitely one of our first go-to markets as well. And we're going through the regulatory process. So once we're ready, at least that's all done. So it's the downside to innovation is it takes time. But we are in a rush, because the world can only go on like
that's
this for so long.
The truth. And are you finding potential customers that are already interested? That's to say that once you have regulatory approval, we're on board.
Yeah, we actually have a few. So we have in the US, in Europe, South Africa, and we're actually already starting R&D with them. So even before the approval process, sort of the early stage R&D, and the idea is so that once it's approved and once we're at scale, like, it's a very seamless go-to-market, as opposed to getting regulation and then sort of doing integration into their products. So we're starting that already. So I think that will also accelerate a lot of the go-to-market.
That's great. There was a raise by EUDA this year, and I was going to invest, but they were offering like a convertible note because they're growing so fast, and they say they're not going to convert that note to shares for like 2 years, and then so at that point they're probably going to be a $200 million company or something like that. So like I like finding these new innovative sort of industries and companies like you guys, because I don't think a lot of people that aren't paying attention to the how would you call it? It's not that you guys aren't plant-based. So the entire shift off of animal products, how big it's going to be and how fast it's going to be so productive. One kind of selfish question I have, as I mentioned before our call, is I'm trying to develop, just for fun, a vegan protein brand. So I'm trying to develop vegan protein powder and vegan protein bars. And my food scientist is actually in South Africa, and so she's doing kitchen trials right now.
That's so
And
cool.
I want to have a really clean label, and also a certain amount of grams of protein per bar. Like, so would I be able to utilize any of the ingredients that you're bringing to market once they're viable, and how might I integrate that into those products?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the protein that we're working on, one of our
Okay.
first goes to market is sports nutrition. So bars are a very cool option for us, and it would just be, I guess, in place of other protein. It would just, I guess, instead of vegan protein, just have a
Right. Yeah,
cleaner
because right now
taste.
we're trying to experiment with some like one medicinal mushroom in there to have more immune support and have a really like clean, helpful bar that doesn't have like a heavy protein taste. And so, because maybe I really don't understand how you guys are using it so much as an ingredient, I'm still kind of taking online courses to learn all those things. So you would essentially, what would you call this ingredient even? Like, and is it going to be in a powder for some food producers?
Yeah, so we're going to go. We're doing it in a powder.
Okay.
It's just much easier for distribution and use and all that sort of stuff. And then the protein, it'll be 95% purity. So the actual
Wow.
protein, it's basically 100% protein. But the one cool thing about it is that it's
Mm-hmm.
the way that it's structured. The actual function of the protein is biologically active, so it actually has immune functions in your body. So it's not just important from an amino acid point of view. It's really got a biological function, which is what's so cool about it. And you only really need it in like up to 2% in your end formulation for
Right.
it really to have a really big, profound impact in your bodies. So it's very cool from an
Right.
immune regulatory point of view because it's a very functional protein, but it also contributes to your end,
It
protein content as well.
Like I said, we're using pea protein and brown rice to make it complete, because I can't remember which amino acid is not included in pea protein. But so let's say in the future people would use DeNovo's protein in their products. You said you only need 2% to make a real difference, but would people, would food producers be encouraged to use, like, if I wanted 20 grams of vegan protein in my protein bar and it's only like a 50 or 60 gram bar, would I use 100% of your product, or no, it's only ideal to use 5% of it?
There would be no negative side effects of using it at 100% of your total protein requirement. I think the only downside at this point is that it is, I guess, more expensive. And
Right.
that's sort of why we're working on this protein, is that it is an expensive protein,
Mm-hmm.
because the end inclusion is quite small. We can make it cheaper using our technology than current versions of it, but it's still not going to be,
Okay.
a whey protein price. It's not a bulk protein. It's really more of a speciality functional. So you can, but it would almost
Right,
just be
from a financial
wasteful from
perspective. Okay.
from an end. Yeah, because it'll complement things like other proteins and sort of facilitate a lot of the biological functioning. So you can sort of, you can start creating
Right.
blends.
This is quite complicated. Like, even I understand precision fermentation, like, just
It does
above
get
a
kind
very,
of.
very base level, and I still don't understand it. And so, like, communicating to people how these things would work, or even to say, like, this protein
Yeah.
powder, this bar has this molecule in it or this type of protein in it. Yeah, I guess maybe that's part of what you guys are doing now. Like, how do you brand this? How do you, like, are you thinking of calling it a specific thing so people can know, like, this is the Bessa molecule that's good, that will be in your in your formula, and everyone's like, yay, our baby's going to be very healthy. We have the Bessa formula.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a big element. You want to sort of create trust around your protein or your product, and with that comes information and education. So it does help if there's a name for it. So we're busy putting that together and sort of finding the right one that sort of encompasses
Right.
all the elements of branding that we want. Education is a huge part.
For sure.
You don't want to
Sure.
confuse
That one
people, but you
tagline.
want
But
people
yeah,
to
thanks.
know what you're doing.
Yeah, good luck with that branding, because that is quite the challenge. Not to mention just the technical side. That is where the real work comes into play. But I do want to be respectful for your time. So thanks so much for joining me and having this chat. I really appreciate it, especially with a new podcast and show and all. And I wish you guys the best of luck. And I'm excited to try the Bessa protein whenever it comes out.
Thanks again for watching. Lots more videos to come in the next couple of weeks on how companies are combining all of these food technologies, what some of the investment opportunities are, and how you can do that, especially if you are an accredited investor. I did get a new microphone set up. I am keeping this super simple right now. I do a ton of post-processing on the audio to try and cut out all the crap. Let me know if this new setup works. If not, I'll maybe get one of those clip microphones that can go on my shirt. I'll see you in the next video.